The Eternal Hegemony, a socio-political and institutional history of ancient Rome from founding to the Byzantine succession. The historical trajectory of ancient Rome represents one of the most significant phenomena in human civilization, evolving from a marginal agrarian settlement on the banks of the Tiber River into a transcontinental hegemon that defined the cultural, legal, and political landscape of the Western world. This evolution was not a linear progression, but a complex series of systemic adaptations, internal frictions, and external conquests. The Roman experience is characterized by its capacity to assimilate foreign influences, most notably from the Etruscans and the Greeks, and to project authority through sophisticated institutional frameworks and unprecedented engineering prowess. To understand Rome is to examine the tension between its agrarian origins, its republican aspirations, and its eventual transition into an absolute autocracy that spanned 3 continents. The primordial Tiber, geography, and the nucleation of city-state. The genesis of Rome is inextricably linked to the unique topography of the Latium region in central Italy. Situated on a series of volcanic hills overlooking a strategic ford on the Tiber River, the site offered both defensive advantages and immense commercial potential. The Tiber served as a navigable waterway, providing merchants with access to the sea, while the hills, the Palatine, Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Celian, offered refuge from seasonal flooding and potential invaders. This geography facilitated a slow process of nucleation, where disparate Italic village communities gradually merged into a singular political entity. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Palatine Hill was inhabited as early as the 10th or 9th century BCE, significantly predating the traditional legendary foundation. These early settlers were likely a mix of Latins and Sabines who recognized the value of the Tiber Ford for controlling the salt trade and north-south movement along the Italian peninsula. The transformation from a collection of thatched hut villages into a cohesive city was catalyzed by the influence of the neighboring Etruscans to the north, who provided models for urban planning, trade, and religious ritual. The mythic loom, Aeneas, Romulus, and the construction of Roman identity was founded upon an elaborate weave of myth designed to provide the city with a prestigious and divine pedigree. These legends, while historically unverified, serve as a crucial cultural glue that justified Roman militarism and social hierarchies. The Trojan connection and the Aeneid. One of the most enduring myths links Rome to the fall of Troy. According to this tradition, the Trojan hero Aeneas, son of the goddess Aphrodite, escaped the destruction of his city and traveled to Italy. This legend was famously codified by Virgil in the Aeneid, presenting Aeneas as the ancestor of Romulus and Remus. This Trojan link was more than mere storytelling. It was a diplomatic tool used to connect Roman power with the ancient grandeur of the Greek world, effectively Romanizing the Homeric tradition and providing a sense of destiny to the Roman state. The Romulan foundation and the Palatine dispute. The most localized foundation myth focuses on the twin brothers Romulus and Remus, traditionally born to the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia and the god Mars. According to the narrative, the twins were abandoned to drown in the Tiber by the usurper King Amulius, but were miraculously saved and suckled by a she-wolf. After growing to adulthood and restoring their grandfather Numitor to the throne of Alba Longa, the brothers decided to found their own city. The fatal quarrel that followed centered on the choice of site. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, while Remus preferred the Aventine. When Romulus began constructing walls around the Palatine, Remus mockingly jumped over them, leading Romulus, or his supporters, to kill his brother, declaring that thus would perish anyone who crossed the city's boundaries. Romulus thus became the eponymous founder on April 21st, 753 BCE, a date that remained the cornerstone of the Roman calendar. The Roman Kingdom, institutional origins and Etruscan influence. The Roman Kingdom, 753 to 509 BCE, served as the formative period for the state's political, religious, and social institutions. Although the specific details of the 7 legendary kings are often shrouded in myth, The progression of their reigns reflects the city's expansion and its increasing sophistication. The Seven Kings and their societal blueprints. The monarchy was not strictly hereditary. Kings were often elected by the people and confirmed by the Senate, though they held absolute power. Imperium, once in office. Romulus, 753 to 716 BCE, established the Senate, 100 Patres, the 3 centuries of horsemen, and the 30 curiae. Numa Pompilius, 715 to 673 BCE, a Sabine noted for piety, established the Vestal Virgins, the Pontifex Maximus, and the Temple of Janus. Tullus Hostilius, 673 to 641 BCE, militaristic expansionist, destroyed Alba Longa and built the first Senate house, the Curia Hostilia. Ancus Marcius, 641 to 616 BCE, established the port of Ostia and the first bridge over the Tiber. Pons Sublicius sought a balance of peace and defense. Tarquinius Priscus, 616 to 579 BCE, Etruscan ruler who began the Cloaca Maxima sewer system and the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Servius Tullius, 578 to 535 BCE, reformed the census and social classes, built the first full wall around the Seven Hills, Servian Wall. Tarquinius Superbus, 535 to 509 BCE, a tyrannical figure whose abuse of power and disregard for the Senate led to the abolition of the monarchy. The later Etruscan kings, particularly the Tarquins and Servius Tullius, are more historically grounded and are credited with the architectural transformation of Rome from a village to a Mediterranean city. Servius Tullius's reforms were particularly vital, as he linked political power and military obligation to wealth rather than solely to birth, creating a census-based class system that would endure for centuries. The fall of the monarchy. The transition from kingdom to republic was precipitated by the tyranny of Lucius Tarquinius Superbus. His reign was characterized by violence, intimidation, and the marginalization of the Senate. The catalyst for the revolution was the rape of the noblewoman Lucretia by the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius. This event galvanized the Roman aristocracy, led by Lucius Junius Brutus, to expel the Tarquins in 509 BCE and vow that Rome would never again be ruled by a king. The architecture of power, the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic, 509 to 27 BCE, was defined by a complex, unwritten constitution designed to prevent the concentration of power in a single individual. This system relied on the principles of collegiality, annuality, and a delicate balance between democratic, aristocratic, and monarchical elements. The magistracies and the cursus honorum. Aspiring Roman politicians followed a strictly regulated ladder of offices known as the cursus honorum. This system ensured that those who reached the highest levels of power had extensive experience in both military and civil administration. Consuls. The pinnacle of the Republic, 2 consuls were elected annually to hold supreme executive and military power, imperium. They presided over the Senate and led the armies in times of war. Praetors, senior magistrates who managed the judicial system and could also command armies. They were the second highest ranking officials. Aediles, responsible for public works, city maintenance, grain supply, and the organization of public games. Quaestors, handled the public treasury and financial administration, often serving as seconds in command to provincial governors. Censors, elected every 5 years, they conducted the census, oversaw public morality, and had the power to appoint or remove members of the Senate. To ensure stability in times of extreme crisis, the Senate could appoint a dictator, a temporary official with absolute power for a maximum of 6 months. The Senate and popular assemblies. While the magistrates held executive power, the Senate was the Republic's most prestigious and influential body, composed of approximately 300 to 600 former magistrates serving for life. The Senate primarily managed foreign policy and the treasury. Although technically an advisory body, its senatus consulta, decrees, were almost universally followed due to the collective authority and experience of its members. The democratic element was represented by several citizen assemblies, where male citizens voted on laws and elected officials. Comitia Centuriata, organized by military centuries, favored the wealthy. Elected consuls, praetors, and censors declared war, ratified the census. Comitia Tributa, organized by 35 geographical tribes, elected lower magistrates, quaestors, aediles, passed minor legislation. Concilium Plebis, excluded patricians, presided over by tribunes, elected tribunes of the plebs, passed plebiscites that became binding law. The struggle of the orders and the 12 tables. The early republic was marked by a socio-political conflict between the patricians, the ruling elite, and the plebeians, the common citizens. This struggle of the orders led to the creation of the tribune of the plebs, an office whose holders were sacrosanct and possessed the power to veto any magistrate or senate action that harmed the common people. A fundamental milestone in this era was the publication of the 12 Tables in 449 BCE. Commissioned after a period of arbitrary legal decisions by patrician priests, this first written code of Roman law was displayed in the Forum for all to see. It addressed property rights, family law, and debt, ensuring that even the poorest citizen had a public reference for their rights. The Mediterranean crucible, expansion and dominance. Rome's rise from a regional power to a Mediterranean hegemon was driven by a combination of military discipline, diplomatic flexibility, and a relentless pursuit of security through expansion. The Punic Wars, the struggle for supremacy. The conflict with Carthage, a powerful North African trade empire, was the defining struggle of the Middle Republic. Known as the Punic Wars, 264 to 146 BCE, these three conflicts dictated the future of Western civilization. First Punic War, 264 to 241 BCE, primarily a naval war fought over Sicily. Rome developed its first major navy and defeated the Carthaginian fleet at the Aegates Islands, gaining its first overseas provinces, Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC, initiated by the Carthaginian general Hannibal, who crossed the Alps with elephants and decimated Roman legions at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae. Despite losing over 120,000 men in 3 years, Rome refused to surrender. The Roman general Scipio Africanus eventually took the war to Carthaginian territory in Spain and Africa, defeating Hannibal at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. Third Punic War, 149 to 146 BC, driven by Roman fear of a resurgent Carthage. The war ended with the total destruction of the city, the enslavement of its population, and the annexation of its territory as the province of Africa. The conquest of Greece and the East. Simultaneously, Rome expanded into the Hellenistic world. After defeating Macedon at the Battle of Pydna in 168 BCE, Rome became the arbiter of Greek affairs. By 89 BCE, all of Magna Graecia, southern Italy, and Sicily was under direct control, and the Roman legions had begun to absorb the territories of the East. This expansion brought immense wealth and Greek cultural influence to Rome, famously described by the poet Horace. Captive Greece took captive her savage conqueror. The fracturing of the Republic, social decay, and the rise of warlords. The immense wealth and influx of millions of slaves from conquest fundamentally altered Roman society. Large slave-worked estates, latifundia, displaced small, independent farmers who were the traditional backbone of the Roman military. These displaced citizens migrated to Rome, forming a volatile, unemployed urban mob. The Gracchi and the seeds of civil war. The reform movements of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, 133 to 121 BCE, sought to redistribute public land to the poor. However, their attempts to bypass the Senate led to political violence and their eventual assassinations. This period marked the breakdown of traditional political norms and the beginning of a century characterized by internal unrest and civil war. Marius, Sulla, and the professionalization of the legions. In the late 2nd century BCE, the general Gaius Marius implemented military reforms that allowed landless citizens to join the army, with the state providing equipment. This shifted the primary loyalty of the soldiers from the Roman state to their individual generals, who were responsible for securing their retirement benefits in land or gold. The rivalry between Marius and his former lieutenant Lucius Cornelius Sulla led to the first major civil wars and Sulla's march on Rome. After declaring himself dictator, 82 to 80 BC, Sulla used proscriptions to execute his political enemies and sought to restore the power of the Senate, though his example only proved that power could be seized by force. The final collapse. The triumvirates and Julius Caesar. The final decades of the Republic were dominated by individuals who utilized the military to dominate the political sphere. The first triumvirate, an informal alliance between Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Crassus, 60 BC, aimed to bypass the Senate to achieve their personal goals. Caesar's rise. After conquering Gaul, 58 to 51 BCE, Caesar's success and popularity threatened Pompey and the Senate. Ordered to relinquish his command, Caesar instead crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, igniting a civil war. After defeating Pompey at Pharsalus, Caesar was appointed dictator for life. Assassination. Caesar's centralization of power and his flirting with kingly titles led a group of senators, including Brutus and Cassius, to assassinate him on March 15, 44 BCE. The second triumvirate and Octavian. Caesar's death led to another cycle of civil war. His heir, Octavian, formed the second triumvirate with Mark Antony and Lepidus to hunt down Caesar's killers. This alliance eventually fractured, leading to the final showdown between Octavian and the forces of Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Octavian's victory left him as the unchallenged master of the Roman world, marking the end of the Republic. The Augustan Principate, the facade of the Republic. In 27 BCE, the Senate granted Octavian the title Augustus, venerated, and the status of princeps, first citizen. While he maintained the outward appearance of republican institutions, Augustus held absolute authority as Rome's first emperor. The Pax Romana, an administrative reform. Augustus inaugurated a 200-year period of relative peace and stability known as the Pax Romana, 27 BC, 180 C. He realized that to secure peace, he had to provide prosperity and efficient governance. Taxation. He replaced corrupt tax farming with a direct, centralized system that was more equitable for the common people. Military. He established a professional standing army, reduced the number of legions, and created the Praetorian Guard as an imperial bodyguard. Infrastructure. Augustus oversaw the massive rebuilding of Rome, providing new forums, aqueducts, and the city's first police and fire brigades, Vigiles Urbani. Social and moral reforms. He passed laws to protect marriage and family, believing that traditional Roman values were the foundation of the state's strength. Augustus's cleverest move was his control of the military. Rather than claiming military power outright, he served as the stand-in governor of the most dangerous provinces where the legions were stationed, making his autocracy palatable to the Roman elite. The High Empire. Expansion and engineering prowess. Following Augustus, the empire reached its peak under the 5 good emperors. During this era, Rome was at its most prosperous, with an integrated economy and an infrastructure that remains legendary. The zenith of territorial extent. Under Emperor Trajan, 98 to 117 CE, the empire reached its maximum size, stretching from Britain to the Persian Gulf and from the Rhine to the Sahara. His successor, Hadrian, focused on consolidation and fortification, building the famous wall in northern Britain and the Pantheon in Rome. The infrastructure of power. Roman engineering was not merely for aesthetic purposes. It was a tool for governance and public health. Aqueducts. Gravity-fed systems with precise gradients, some over 50 miles long, e.g., Aqua Claudia, provided millions of gallons of fresh water to public baths, fountains, and private homes. Road network. Constructed in 5 layers, Statumen, stones, Rudens, concrete, nucleus, rolled concrete, and summa crusta, flint/lava slabs, facilitated rapid military deployment, trade, and communication across 250,000 miles. Roman concrete, mixture of limestone, volcanic ash, pozzolana, and rock, could set underwater, allowed for unprecedented domes, Pantheon, and massive amphitheaters, Colosseum. Hypocaust system, central heating via hot air circulated under floors and through wall flues. Improved comfort and health in villas and public bathhouses. Sewerage, massive underground masonry tunnels, e.g., Cloaca Maxima, draining into the Tiber, drained marshy land and removed waste, reducing disease in densely populated cities. The crisis of the 3rd century. The imperial fracture. The stability of the Pax Romana began to unravel in 235 CE following the assassination of the Emperor Severus Alexander. The subsequent 50 years, known as the crisis of the 3rd century or the military anarchy, saw the Roman Empire nearly collapse. The 5 Fs of collapse. The crisis can be characterized by 5 intersecting pressures. Feuding, constant civil war between rival generals competing for the throne. Factions, the empire split into 3 competing states, the Gallic Empire, the Palmyrene Empire, and the Roman Empire proper. Funding, economic disintegration due to hyperinflation. The silver content in the denarius was reduced to almost zero by barracks emperors, needing to pay their troops. Foreigners, repeated barbarian invasions, Goths, Vandals, Persians, across the overextended borders. Freaky disease. The plague of Cyprian further decimated the population and the labor force. The crisis ended only with the military successes of Aurelian, who reunited the empire, and the administrative reforms of Diocletian. The Dominate and the Tetrarchy, the authoritarian turn. In 284 CE, Diocletian rose to power and initiated the period known as the Dominate. Recognizing the empire was too vast for one man to rule, he established the Tetrarchy, rule of 4, dividing the empire into eastern and western halves, each with an Augustus and a Caesar. The administrative and economic pivot. Diocletian transformed the emperor into an absolute autocrat, elevating himself above the masses with ritualized court ceremonies. He also implemented radical economic policies, including the edict on maximum prices, in an attempt to curb inflation and a standardized taxation system. To protect the borders, he separated military and civil services and fortified strategic locations. Following Diocletian, Constantine the Great, 306 to 337 CE, reunified the empire and made 2 historic changes. He issued the Edict of Milan legalizing Christianity and moved the capital to the Greek colony of Byzantium, which he renamed Constantinople. The Gothic Storm and the Battle of Adrianople. By the late 4th century, the pressure on the borders intensified as the Huns pushed Germanic tribes westward. The disaster of 378 CE. In 376, a group of Visigoths sought asylum in the empire. Corruption and severe mistreatment by Roman officials led the Goths to revolt. On August 9, 378 CE, the Eastern Emperor Valens engaged them at the Battle of Adrianople. The Roman forces, exhausted from a long march and poorly coordinated, were annihilated by Gothic cavalry. 2/3 of the Eastern army and Emperor Valens himself perished. The significance of Adrianople was profound. It marked the end of Roman military supremacy and led to the settlement of large barbarian groups within Roman borders as autonomous nations, a nation within a nation that fatally undermined the Western state. The final eclipse, the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The 5th century saw a series of terminal blows to the Western Empire. In 395 CE, the empire was permanently split after the death of Theodosius I. The sacks of Rome and the deposition of 476. 410 CE. Rome was sacked by the Visigoths under Alaric, the first time the city had fallen in 800 years. For 55 CE, the Vandals invaded from North Africa and sacked Rome even more thoroughly. For 76 CE, The German chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, the 14-year-old Romulus Augustulus, and sent the imperial insignia to Constantinople, declaring that the West no longer needed a separate emperor. Factors for decline, their impact and consequence are interrelated. Military reliance increased use of foreign mercenaries, foederati, who lacked loyalty to the state. Soldiers were more loyal to their own kings or generals than to Rome. Economic erosion debased the currency and trade disruptions caused by insecurity, inability to pay the army or maintain infrastructure. Social shifts, including the rise of Christianity, redirected resources and civic focus away from state functions. Erosion of traditional Roman civic duty and military traditions. Geopolitics. The wealthier East, Byzantium, survived while the poorer West collapsed under migration. Western Europe fragmented into smaller barbarian kingdoms. While the West fell into the Dark Ages, the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, survived for another 1,000 years. Centered on the impregnable city of Constantinople, the Byzantines preserved Greco-Roman culture, law, and administration. Justinian and the Corpus Juris Civilis. The most lasting contribution of this period was the codification of Roman law under Justinian I, 527 to 565 CE. The Corpus Juris Civilis, body of civil law, organized nearly a millennium of legal thought into a cohesive structure, covering imperial laws, jurist opinions, and legal textbooks. This work became the foundation for the legal systems of almost all modern European nations and international law. The cultural bridge to the Renaissance. The Byzantine Empire served as a military buffer for Europe against Eastern invasions and as a repository of ancient knowledge. When Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453 CE, the exodus of Byzantine scholars and manuscripts to Italy helped ignite the Renaissance, bringing the classical heritage of Rome back to the Western world. The Eternal City, a summary of historical synthesis. The history of Rome is a testament to the power of institutional adaptability. From a marginal settlement of shepherds to an empire that governed 50 million people, Rome's success lay in its ability to absorb external cultures. Etruscan engineering, Greek philosophy, and Christian theology, and synthesize them into a universal system. While the Western political structure collapsed under the weight of its own internal decay and external pressures in the 5th century, its legacy in law, language, and civil engineering remains the bedrock of modern Western civilization. Rome did not truly fall. It transformed, leaving an indelible imprint on the political and cultural identity of the world.